I'm JP Robinson, and this is Heroes and Villains.
He fought in 3 wars, flew 409 combat missions, shattered misconceptions about black pilots, and died at 102 years old. His name was Charles McGee. Hello, listeners. This is JP Robinson, your host on Heroes and Villains. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Heroes and Villains is a biweekly podcast spotlighting the people of the world wars. You can find my podcast, Heroes and Villains, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and pretty much any other podcast platform, as well as my website, jprobinsonbooks.com, and my YouTube channel. So again, look for a new episode of Heroes and Villains on the first and third Tuesday of every month. To those of you listening for the first time, a warm welcome to you. And to those who are coming back for more, thanks for joining me again today. Please share information about this podcast with friends, as truly the stories we talk about are worth hearing. You know, February is Black History Month, which often causes people to think about slavery and the Civil Rights Movement. Now, it goes without saying that these are critical aspects of Black history, but there are also other stories, other scenarios that don't often get as much attention. For a long time, I've thought it's very important to commemorate the men and women of color who did incredible things for our country. So today, I want to spotlight an all-American hero, Tuskegee Airman, church leader, and inspirer of young people, Charles McGee. The son of a teacher and minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, McGee's mother died when he was still an infant. As he grew up, he saved his money to attend the University of Illinois and got married in 1942, the very same year that he enlisted in the Tuskegee Airmen. The dangers were clear, the challenges were many, but McGee was resolved to serve his country no matter what it took. Now, to give this some context, I'm going to share something that I'm working on. I'm embroiled in drafting a novel that focuses on the Tuskegee pilots and their families during World War II. As I pore over video footage, comb through historical records, and speak with military experts, I realized that I had no idea how much sacrifice, hope, and dreams are wrapped up in those 2 words, Tuskegee Airman. You know, in the 1930s and 40s, the American military, like much of American society at the time, was segregated. Frankly, there was a cap on how many blacks could serve in the armed forces. Those that did serve were often marginalized because of their skin color, but not only that, they actually had to, in some cases, lived with the threat of violence over their heads, and I mean violence by guys on their own side. So, for example, here's an excerpt of dialogue that was a conversation between 2 white officers of the American Air Force. And this was retrieved from the Smithsonian Institute website. And it was focusing in on a group of officers in the 477th Bombardment Group. Here's a quote. Others, white officers, displayed an eagerness for violence against their fellow officers. As one said, if one of them makes a crack at my wife, laughs or whistles at her like I saw them do to some white girls downtown, so help me, I'll kill him. Another bragged about taking part in lynching, saying, I killed 2 of them in my hometown, and it wouldn't bother me to do it again. Wow, the horror of these statements should really underscore the level of determination that these Tuskegee pilots and their support staff maintained. So with that backdrop, let's take a look at how Mr. McGee and others worked to change perceptions while keeping their own humanity intact. So President D. Roosevelt, this is Franklin D. Roosevelt, had directed that a program to train black pilots and support personnel be established. In answer to this call and the call for pilots, about 14,000 volunteers from across the country came to Tuskegee during wartime, and they became part of the school. Most did not become pilots, but instead they served as mechanics and other support personnel. But about 1,000 of the pilots or volunteers that came down did become pilots, and one of them was Charles McGee. Mr. McGee earned his wings in 1943. 1 year later, he, along with other Tuskegee pilots, was deployed to Italy under the command of Colonel Benjamin Davis. The pilots formed up the 332nd Fighter Group, and at the time, Mr. McGee was a lieutenant. His primary role was to escort heavy bombers, such as the B-17 Flying Fortresses and the B-24 planes, on bombing missions across Europe. So he flew his plane with his wife's name, Kitten. That was her nickname, he called her, written on his plane. And Mr. McGee earned the rank of captain and flew more than 130 combat missions during the war. The contributions of the Tuskegee Airmen were indisputably a key reason that the U.S. Air Force would become a racially integrated force very quickly, comparatively speaking. Captain McGee remained in the U.S. Air Force after the war. When segregation officially ended in 1948 under President Truman, Captain McGee knew it wouldn't end racism, but he wasn't one to let intimidation keep him from doing great things. I really admire his life phrase. It was do while you can. In other words, you've got a limited amount of time to get things done, so get them done. During the Korean War, Captain McGee flew more than 100 combat missions and was promoted to the rank of major. He continued his distinguished career during the Vietnam War and retired in 1973 at the rank of colonel. In 2020, Colonel McGee was promoted to the rank of brigadier general. You know, in looking at the long list of amazing things this man did, it might be tempting to forget that it was really the attitude behind it which allowed him to achieve all of this. And don't forget, Tuskegee Institute, from way back in the beginning of his career, was actually located in the heart of the Jim Crow South. So it's really, we might say that, this is great work that he did, but think about the dynamics that were around it and the attitude it took to persevere. So he was often asked what it was like to be racially targeted at the time. And Mr. McGee's response always floored me. The New York Times quotes him as saying, "Well, fortunately, I didn't think about that much." I draw a lot of meaning from that phrase, and it goes well beyond the scope of racism. When I listen to those words and reflect on it, I hear a wise voice saying that we can all focus on the criticism or problems in life, and we can let the negativity around us consume us, or we can make the choice to focus on fulfilling our dream, fulfilling our purpose. By focusing on preparing himself to fulfill his mission and then doing exactly that, Brigadier General McGee was able to shatter perceptions and open doors that had been closed to millions of Americans. "We shattered all the myths," McGee said. "A lot of what we fought for was an opportunity to overcome having someone look at you and, because of your color, close a door on you." And on behalf of many of my family and friends who are people of color that have served and are still serving in various branches of America's armed forces, I am grateful that door was opened. If you're interested in learning more about the Tuskegee Airmen, there are a ton of online and print books available. Two that I recommend are Dr. Daniel Hullman's The Tuskegee Airmen, An Illustrated History, 1939 to 1949, and a book written by Charles McGee's daughter. Her name is Charlene E. McGee Smith. That book is called Tuskegee Airman. Next month, I'll be hosting Dr. Daniel Hullman, who's a retired historian for the United Air Force, in an interview here on Heroes and Villains. So be sure to subscribe to my podcast and YouTube channel, or just search for JP Robinson Books online and follow me on social media so you don't miss a moment. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you right here next time.